Justin, welcome to Pickup's On The Move podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and I'd like to share a bit more about your experience in the industry and to talk more about your thoughts about how things are moving.
Thanks, Tanya. Lovely to be here. Thank you very much for the invite. Always great to come and visit you in the offices, the Picup offices, and it's nice to see what you guys are doing here.
Yeah.
Going places.
So take us back to the start. Where did it all start for you on the e-commerce side of things?
I think things started from an entrepreneurial journey actually many years ago, predominantly from school, I guess, really. While at school, I was given the opportunity to sell popcorn once in a while at school. And from those early days, there was always some sort of view or idea that I wanted to do something myself. I actually ended up doing software development as my sort of studies, and post that ended up working in banking for a while. While working in banking, ended up having a few sort of variety of jobs in corporate within Johannesburg. And at one of the jobs while we were working, we wanted to get some products from the US which weren't available in South Africa. So naturally, being entrepreneurial, we looked to solve that problem by working out a way how we could ship products from the US to ourselves, for ourselves to use. Because back then, if you wanted to order something off Amazon, South Africa/Africa was viewed as a pariah, you could say, or a place where they weren't willing to ship products. And so we set up a way where we ship products to a place or a friend in America, and then just reship the products to South Africa. And from there, and importing it for ourselves and our friends, more and more people asked us to do that, and that sort of led down the e-commerce journey whereby we decided we wanted to offer the service to more and more South Africans, and we ended up building out a business called Want It All back in 2007, which specialized in products from the US. And in there started the entrepreneurial / logistics journey back when there wasn't much happening, funnily enough.
And that's still going, right?
That's still going, very niche business, focusing on the hard to find items you can't get in South Africa, expensive, we're air freighted out of the US. And it's built and serves predominantly people that are looking for products that you won't find here. So it's not about price, it's about availability. And I think that's what the business is built on. And it's been going, as I said, since 2007, been profitable ever since then. And it's a nice business that ticks along, does its thing, and offers a very niche service, which is great.
But like the Wish concept, right? We all know around the world, Wish, you order from China, takes 8-10 weeks to arrive here. Is it similar to that? How would you compare it to that?
It's similar in that it's a cross-border transaction that's happening. However, what we do is we give you a price in rands that's inclusive of all the sort of VAT, duties, customs, insurance, and everything is sort of around it. And we don't ship from factory, so it's not from factory to consumer. It's from a variety of retailers in the US. So we actually pay retail price for products and bring them in, which means it's not going to be cheap. And because we air freight it, it's bloody expensive to air freight things nowadays. So it's a similar cross-border model, which is talking to logistics and where e-commerce is going. I think that everything is going to be logistics at the end of the day from an e-commerce perspective. And in particular, I think the cross-border is going to become more and more prolific as we see the concept of like Wish and a number of others, Shein, or Shein as people call it, doing cross-border fashion. That's the way e-commerce is going. E-commerce is going cross-border, international, ship things around the world, arbitrage product pricing, availability, and no longer are organizations and companies going to set up their offices in South Africa and distribute products. They're just going to ship it from their home country across the border and deliver it here.
So I guess it's really all about speed. I mean, Wish, as I said, it takes like 10 weeks to get a product. Like, what does it take to get products shipped to South Africa faster? How can we solve that problem?
So I think what's interesting is if you have a look at what's happening in Amazon in the US. So if you take Amazon as a marketplace business, roughly 60% of all Amazon sellers are based in China, which is the first thing that's interesting. The second thing is how many products are shipped from China directly to the US because they have a working postal service. So what people don't realize in South Africa was largely insulated from this, let's call it Chinese e-commerce dominance globally, by this moat that was created by accident, which was the post office. In other words, if we had a functioning post office, we'd have far more products shipped out of other countries directly to South Africa cost effectively. How that developed was people don't realize that globally there's a post office interconnect fee. So post offices every 5 years get together and define a price that they're going to charge each other for delivery, which is similar how Cell C, Vodacom, etc. work, they interconnect. And so the US had an incredibly low cost for people to ship products out of China to the US. It was almost cheaper to ship from China to New York than it was from like downtown to midtown in New York, which is bizarre. And so with that, there was this proliferation of products shipping out of China directly to the US, which we didn't see yet because they couldn't do it because our post office didn't work. But that's how China's been able to build this massive e-commerce businesses servicing countries across borders, which we haven't really seen yet, which is an interesting thing. So
the South African post office, I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. There's obviously a lot that has been said about the post office and the inefficiencies that we experience here in South Africa. We can chat about that later, but I want to talk more about how your Wanted All business has sort of progressed into Parcel Ninja.
So to take us through a bit of the story there, so we had the Wanted All business bringing products from the US into South Africa, and being these lazy programmer guys, what you don't want to be doing is touching products and doing the same thing twice. So when you're very lazy, plus you're a programmer, what you end up doing is automating everything. So what we did is we went and built a lot of automated systems around this importation process from the US to South Africa. And once the products reached South Africa, we used to have a slow, laborious process or task of sorting everything out. So we used to ship, let's say, 300 kilograms of random stuff from the US, used to arrive at our offices, which were about 70 square meters. And then we'd have to line everything out on the floor, identify the products, and then work out how to ship them to our customers, which was the final leg. Bizarrely enough, it was more effort to ship locally, that final leg, than it was to bring the products from the US to South Africa. And so we went about automating that process and building our own little warehouse system or system to track products, and built that out and became more and more efficient and competent at that. And then one day I was introduced to the team at a business called City Mob, which is in the old Groupon days. And City Mob was obviously selling vouchers, etc., and they were sort of moving into the product sort of field. And those businesses were exploding. We met with the guys, Luke and Claude, and had a bit of a chat with them about what they were doing. And they mentioned to me how many products they were starting to ship and what was happening. And I said to them, well, what systems have you got to manage all this? And they said they haven't got everything. They've outsourced it to a courier to do it. I said, wow, that's quite interesting, because couriers know how to deliver. They don't know how to pick and pack products. And that's why we had to build our pick and packing solution. So I said to them, if ever you have drama and you want to do that, maybe there's something we can do together, which is cool. Fast forward 3 or 4 months to December. And effectively I got a call from, I think it was Claude or Luke, saying that they've got big drama. The couriers don't know what they actually do with picking and packing, and they need some solution. So I said to them, well, come hook up with us, use our warehouse. We'll help you pick and pack, and maybe there's a way for us to get involved in the business. And so we took that evolution of the Wanted All picking and packing sort of like automation that we did, gave that to the guys at City Mob, which then morphed in a business called Superbalist, the fashion retailer. And all of that, we did that sort of underlying process there out of the necessity that we use for ourselves. So the concept is that old like idea of dog food things. When you build something for yourself that you use and you think there's an opportunity to give it to someone else, that's really what we did there.
So that's generally how a lot of startups work. They're solving problems for themselves or other companies, and then they formulate a business and ideas is formulated and they start from there. So you're really like from solving your own problem with Wanted All, the need for that service, warehousing, picking, packing, faster distribution was needed by other companies, other startups around South Africa, and so Superbalist was City Mob. Superbalist was one of your first clients, and then how did you progress? How did you create exposure for? I suppose you started the Parcel Ninja brand, and then started marketing the business from that point, right?
Well, what we did was, the first thing is we just focused on internally within the Superbalist / City Mob business, making sure that we knew how to do that right and see what are some of the nuances that they needed versus maybe what we were doing with the Wanted All business. And so augmenting those sort of two sets of requirements and getting a view of what we need to build gave us a nice way to test things. At the same time, they were obviously quite friendly to what we were doing, so we could fiddle and change and fix things as we went and sort of built the ship while it was going, if I can say that. And that sort of friendly approach to it allowed us to go and build systems, rebuild systems, and maybe think broad about what we were doing. So the intention with bringing them on board was never to go and make a business out of it. It was first to solve the problem for them, which we became shareholders in the business and help them there. And after doing that, we thought, well, maybe if we can do it for these guys, maybe there's like you said, there's others that need it. And then we just started asking around and speaking to people we knew and brought them on board. And when we thought we had something that was a product, let's call it that, or I think, like you try launch it embarrassingly early so that it doesn't really always work. But if you wait too long, you don't go anywhere. So I think it is the idea to launch something that you're embarrassed about, which we definitely did. And we just went and spoke to people that we knew and offered the service and started that way. And initially we went and spoke to a lot of small customers who needed the service, and that's how we started. And then later on, we managed to work with like larger clients who were looking for the solution. And I think that everyone thinks that you're an overnight success, but it takes quite a few years to get there. So I think that process there happened around, I can't really remember the year, probably like 2015, somewhere around there. So the Parcel Ninja process only really started around that time, which is cool.
And that was a relatively early time in sort of e-commerce in South Africa. It's still getting off the ground. A lot of retailers are trying to understand developing an e-commerce strategy. The couriers, why do you think they were not forward thinking to put forward solutions like this to a city mob crew that were looking to get a business started? Surely not only them, they obviously progressed into Superbalist, but there were a lot of other startups that were pushing the space, trying to get into e-commerce. Why do you think not couriers weren't forward thinking with that approach that you took?
I think that there's a host of reasons why couriers didn't get there. I think the first one is these courier businesses are traditionally old school businesses where people aren't necessarily forward thinking and things haven't changed for many, many years. The courier business has been the same business for probably 25, 30 years where nothing new's happened. There hasn't been a reason to deliver too much to people's homes, and the expectation from like a service side wasn't there. So it was just everyone used to do the bare minimum with no IT systems and just run a courier as a bunch of vehicles, and you deliver some stuff to people's homes, but predominantly business to business, where the expectation wasn't really high. Then with the sort of rate of change that we saw with e-commerce and things coming on board, some couriers thought e-commerce never going to be a big thing. Others maybe took it a bit more seriously, but no one really wanted to invest deeply into the technology that you needed to make it work. So with them not even being able to, let's just say, with them battling to do home delivery to a degree, the last thing they were thinking about were like ancillary or other services. Like the basics of getting a home delivery right, as that was getting bigger, became their first priority, and all the other stuff that used to happen, they just left that. They didn't have time to worry about those things. They were still trying to work out how to build tech, what tech was, what fleets they need to do, how do you deliver to someone's home, whether or not they cared about delivering to people's homes. So they really didn't take it as like a serious thing back in the day then.
And do you think that's changing now?
I think it's been changing over the last few years. There's a difference between taking something seriously and taking something like really seriously, So I think and a lot of the organizations aren't forward thinking or don't have a strong technology background or competency. So when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, I guess is the old analogy. And the couriers just predominantly went with the same solution every single time to everybody, and have never offered any differentiated services or specialization or anything around that. And only now are we seeing them understand that technology is a differentiator, integration is important, client service is a thing, and all of that is sort of developed over the last few years. But the first like 10 years, it was not a consideration at all. When we spoke about technology or APIs, no one knew what that was really. So that's how sort of backward it was back then. And that's probably like 10 years ago. And so what we had to do is we had to force the couriers. We said, if we want to work with you, you better build an API for us. And then some of them bought into that and built some APIs, very basic, and others just never went that route.
Yeah, the couriers, we also find that working with them a lot, their technology is not quite where it should be. I think predominantly it's because they are big ships moving, big DCs, smaller warehouses, and in order to integrate good technology, you almost need to upset the apple cart, go and change a lot of things, and they generally don't. It doesn't seem like they have liked to do that, so they keep moving along. How did you incorporate good tech into Parcel Ninja from the beginning, and how are you looking at continually improving that as you go?
So I think for us, I guess there's a few questions there. The first one is, let's deal with the why have the couriers not got to where they need to get to, let's say. And some of them have. Predominantly or historically, the couriers, as I said, are not technology-driven organizations. Their operationalization is key to what they do. So strong ops, focus on consistency, predictability, and processes are what they really focus on. And so they've been an organization that's led from both a sales perspective and an operations perspective, with RT being a small component of what they do. When we started our business, we were tech guys that happened to be doing logistics by accident. So we always took a technology first approach to things. So we would always design systems and processes around that, and then work out how to operationalize that a little bit later on. Later on, we ended up bringing in people that were strong from an ops perspective, so we could do the tech in conjunction with them, and so the two sort of work well together with a ops requesting stuff from tech and us being tech people being able to build all of that. So technology being expensive to build, without the right leadership within technology, you sometimes get it wrong. And so we had a deep understanding of technology or core competency around tech, which gave us some of that advantage, which makes us a bit different to the traditional couriers. The other thing from the couriers is that from their perspective, it's a big moving ship, which is difficult to change things in that when you want to change systems, it's normally going to affect a lot of people and a lot of things. So that change management is something that's incredibly difficult to do. So if I had to take the pickup business and you said, we need to get rid of our existing tech platform and roll out something new, whoa, that's quite scary and difficult to do. So you'd be a bit nervous in that. So I understand why the couriers have the same sort of approach. And with that, they normally outsource a lot of what they do. And so none of them actually owned any of their core competency, which is tech and distribution. So they use third-party systems, which are all the same, which means that you're offering the same service to everybody, which means that you're fighting on price, which means that it's a race to the bottom from a cost perspective, and then you don't always have the money to invest in the technology. So that's the sort of challenge we see from them. And as to how we did it is we just looked at what was happening abroad, really. So we have this crystal ball, which is like the rest of the world. We just see what's happening there, work out when we think it's going to be coming to South Africa, probably adopt some of that a little bit too early ourselves in our business. But we know what's coming out, what's largely happening abroad, and then you just got to take a little bit of a South African flair or flavor or something into that, and off you go. It's not about coming up with something revolutionary. What we do is we just happen to do something that's happening overseas, and we do it well.
COVID-19, for some couriers it was a challenge to get through that time. For a lot of other couriers, it was a busy time. How did it affect you? How did it affect the warehousing industry?
I still remember during the COVID period at the very beginning, it was effectively, don't forget, e-commerce was closed down. So for the first lockdown period, there was no e-commerce and distribution happening. So we actually largely closed our business, to be honest, for most of the time. So we had a warehouse that was running with obviously the people, the staff, etc., and no real business and nothing to do. We were doing some, let's call it key work for essentials, very small amount of work there, but the majority was closed down. Once the sort of e-commerce restrictions were lifted and it became this sort of like new norm of ordering online, I think that's when the business started to sort of pick up traction, but got into the mode of this is something that's important, and us doubling down on the whole e-commerce sort of distribution and delivery part of things. For our partners and courier partners that we make use of, because I mean, we do the picking and packing, they've got to deliver it. It was largely something that we worked in conjunction with them to do, and they managed the delivery part. We just had to make sure that we could get the stuff to them, which is the critical part there. So it was while a trying time, I think it was a wake-up call for both ourselves and retailers that there's something here in e-commerce which was interesting.
And this concept of decentralized distribution, it's fast taking up the space. Retailers are wanting to get closer to the customers. In your experience with a DC, that's generally a one central big center that distributes around the country. How do retailers adopt a decentralized distribution strategy? Meaning, how do they get their products to customers faster? How do they do that?
I think it's an approach that needs to be looked at from a individual sort of retailer's perspective. And it starts from the sort of customer view, which is, does your customer want this stuff quicker or cheaper or access to it? And depending on the product mix or the product range or what you're selling, there's a need for it or less so. In other words, if you're in Q-commerce, quick commerce, checker 60/60, etc., you can't run that business without a decentralized approach. If you're doing, let's take it, iPhones, maybe there's a bit of a hybrid approach there, because some people want their phone or their device exceptionally quickly because they've lost it or stolen it and it's an important device, so they want to get it now. And then on the other side of things, maybe there's a slower requirements perspective, which is where people are requesting a custom product or a product that's simple or not needed in a rush, where they're willing to wait a little bit for and forego an expensive delivery cost. And I think depending on each of those, that informs your network or how you should go build out your delivery, both fleet as well as your distribution centers. That being said, if you're a large retailer and you have a footprint of stores, or you maybe want to leverage those stores to be close to the customer, or you want to go build out some dark stores, or you want to go build out some facilities closer to the customer to make things easier, because it's not always easy picking and packing or finding products within the store. So inevitably there's a journey that the retailers go on, which is you start centralized and then you move to your stores, and then you realize that there's too much volume to go to your stores, and then you build dark stores closer to the guys. So it's part of that sort of evolutionary journey that needs to be decided upon. But some of the retailers that have lots of stores should be routing orders to their closest stores, picking and packing, delivering next day effectively, efficiently, cheaply, or delivering the same day and offering that service at no additional cost, and leveraging or sweating those assets which they have with your stores. Because I think physical retailers versus pure play e-commerce have an advantage in that they've got those stores. Now they must do something with them, I think.
Right.
Do they have the tech to run it? I'm not sure, because you need to route the orders, etc. But that's definitely available and doable nowadays.
Right. So talking about tech and how it drives that, the whole concept of the decentralized stores is one thing. You've got to get customers ordering, wanting something in 2 hours or 60 minutes. To get the stock and packed at the store is a challenge. The word AI, it's everywhere at the moment. ChatGPT. How does AI and logistics, in your opinion, fit together? How can AI improve the way logistics works? Amazon, they started stocking products at micro DCs before they knew someone ordered them, because 5 years ago apparently they started using AI to understand, we know that 10 orders are coming there in that little DC, so we're going to ship 15 there. And they just understood data. How can we use data and AI to improve the way logistics works?
I think the key use, or one of the key points of differentiation from an AR perspective, is not necessarily in the last mile delivery point, because I think that's largely solved through, let's call it, traveling salesman problems or those sort of things to route orders, which is done. It's a further upstream sort of solution, which you touched on earlier, which is around this concept of knowing what products should be where, when, and building these predictive models on top of all of that. So if you have a look at what Amazon's made available, for instance, is one of their forecasting tools that you can make use of, which is an AR forecasting tool, where you give it your sales data and it will predict what you're going to be selling of what product where. So if you take some of that predictive modeling with propensity and understand your customers who should be ordering what when, you can improve your sort of forecasting, both from like a demand perspective and a supply perspective, and get the products preemptively ready for that distribution. I think what's going to evolve in the future of that will be one day things will just arrive at your house from Amazon with some products and say, Justin, do you want these? You say, oh yes, I didn't know I needed these. Thanks for letting me know, Amazon. Take the ones I want. The ones I don't want, close the box and tell them to come and fetch the rest. Because from a product recommendation perspective, I think they'll know what you want. They'll probably know when you want it. And then when you layer that with logistics and deliver it to your door, it becomes a hell of a compelling offering.
So if we're talking about that, Amazon's, we know, is coming to South Africa, should Takealot be concerned with them entering into the space and having all these things like predictive AI, purchasing, understanding what needs to be stocked at what DC? Should they be worried?
I think what's interesting just from the AI perspective is that like the strongest AR models are the models that are built with the most data. So now you could argue that Amazon has the most data, which is correct to a degree, but doesn't have South African data around South African shopping habits, etc. So I think that from a product recommendation perspective, with the right level of AR, Takealot should have a better recommendation engine than Amazon at the start. Once those models start becoming refined and there's more data, it improves the model. So I think that the AI component with recommendations, Takealot has something there which is interesting. From a like brand perspective, and would I be worried if I was Takealot and Amazon was coming out? Well, I'm not sure what Amazon's going to be doing, but I would imagine that there's a lot of overlap from a product perspective. And if we have a look how Amazon enters other markets, it's normally through a marketplace solution, which is what Takealot's got. So I think that Amazon will be able to launch in South Africa with a fairly similar offering to Takealot. I think they're going to have to do some differentiation, which may be some products or their house brand products or products, Amazon Basics, which are products that they manufacture. So I think they'll be able to have some of that and drive some points of differentiation, maybe with suppliers on unique products. So I think that Amazon has some key components which differentiate from Takealot, but Takealot also has some as well. From a supply chain perspective, I'm not too sure what that looks like, but I know like Takealot and Amazon are going to have DCs in Joburg and Cape Town. That's already been sort of disclosed, or it's been spoken about briefly. And I think that if Amazon can maybe deliver a little bit quicker, that would give them an advantage. But we also see Takealot now moving towards a faster delivery model, cheaper, etc. So there's definitely something happening there. I don't think it's going to be as easy for Amazon just to walk in and do what Takealot does, because Takealot's got quite like extensive range of products at the same time. So I think it's going to be more difficult than anticipated, but Amazon has got a big brand at the end of the day.
And I guess Takealot did well with acquiring Mr. D and building their own logistics supply chain. What's your experience with Mr. D and the infrastructure they set up? I think it's pretty good, and how they've decentralized their hubs that overlap with Mr. D food and product. I think that's going to be that's their strong point, don't you think?
I don't know too much about the Mr. D delivery business, other than my experiences when ordering with Takealot, which have always been exceptional, really. Very rarely does Takealot not deliver on the date they're going to deliver on. They have the ability to give you the delivery dates, which I think is great. They give you the options for multiple delivery options. They give you the option to pay for faster delivery. So from a last mile perspective, they've got collection points. I think that they offer quite a comprehensive delivery service, and I think that that's been built out in conjunction with their Mr. D acquisition, which is, I think, key to building out a pure play e-commerce business is supply chain logistics. Any large retailer that is worth their salt builds a component of their last mile distribution at the same time. You don't just outsource that completely if you're massive.
So you're saying a big retailer needs to, let's talk about RTT and Checker 6060. They have a partnership in this Pingo, a joint venture. Why do you think? Why a partnership? Why were Checkers so focused at a partnership? Why didn't they just outsource their?
I think in the partnership model that they've gone with, or co-ownership, let's put it that way, in that business, there's a way in which you can scale quicker. In other words, you will outsource when you need to move quickly, and I think that the starting point of Checkers outsourcing out at the beginning to RTT was a scaling issue. In other words, they had launched just pre-COVID, and then once the e-commerce and COVID sort of announcements had happened, I think the Checkers business the 6060 business exploded, which is difficult for you to scale quick enough as an internal sort of retailer where your competency is not distribution. And so that outsourced model starts, and then you realize that this is important, we better take some of this in-house, and your choices are build it completely ourselves or work with partners, and they've gone that partnership route. And if you look at almost every other large retailer in the on-demand space, they almost went and bought all of these small on-demand companies, brought them in-house, which is effectively the RP, and scaled those out to do things. So Checkers has kind of done the same thing in that way.
Yeah. So that on-demand space was largely spurred on by COVID. Like going back to e-commerce, you're saying that retailers kind of need to go in and own a lot of the process. How do you seeing that with the likes of a Bash coming into the market, and other talking to Edcon, I think it is. Yeah, I think they were in trouble some time ago. I think they're back on the map, and they surely need to go in. Are they going to be looking to own some of their infrastructure?
I think that firstly, the Bash team are the guys, the ex-Superblis team who we used to work together with. So they're incredibly strong bunch of people, actually. So some of the founders of the Superblis business, Luke and Claude, who have moved across to Bash, are probably the most competent e-commerce individuals I know. So they are hell of us knowledgeable in e-commerce, understand the entire sort of e-commerce process and all of the components that make that up. Which parts they want to own, I'm not sure. However, I think that the old way of doing things, which was we must either own everything or outsource everything, needs to change to like a more hybridized model, whereby some parts you want to own, the points of differentiation you probably want to own or improve on or build tech, and some of those other parts that you can't get to quick enough, or you feel that there's a provider that can help you do that, you outsource to at the same time. So I think that this model of, as I said, doing everything yourself or outsourcing everything moves to a hybrid model where you sometimes use someone's fleet, you sometimes use your own, you outsource what you can, you pick from DC, you pick from stores, and you do what makes sense. And in that complexity, like you need a tech layer that goes over all of that, because you can't do any of that manually at scale. So when there's investment in tech, plus you use these hybrid approaches, I think that's where you unlock the value, the profitability at the end of the day, and the customer experience, because you can't do it all.
So essentially they're taking more control of the process themselves, whereas in the past a lot of the retailers were in the hands of the couriers, in the hands of how the courier's tech drives their business, and that's changing.
Yeah, so I think that as I said, I think they'll still make use of couriers for some work. I think that you want to do some of it yourself. So you want in-store collection. You may want to pick from stores or dark stores. So I think it's all your centralized DC. So it's not like a one-size-fits-all sort of approach. And then you overlay that with complexity around product. In other words, well, cell phones you might want to deliver with a particular courier because it's high risk. General merchandise you might deliver yourself. And then you say, well, there's heavy goods because we're delivering beds. We need to outsource that to a third party. So when you overlay those complexities of geography with product, I think things start to get quite complicated, and you need to really think about solutions and employ tech to help solve some of those.
Yeah. Getting back to the post office, we similar ages, and we understand the post office back in the day when it was pretty functional. what's your experience of dealing with the post office? Did you ever deal with them when it was functional and going? And what's the future? Do you see them getting back on the map and essentially assisting businesses, because your local national post office should be there to offer smaller, medium businesses with good prices to distribute products? Or what's your view on the post office in South Africa, and do you think it's going to get back on the map?
If I think back, there's like two major events that we've seen that have an overlap with the post office. The first was around probably, I don't know, maybe 2007, 2008, where Amazon said they're not shipping products to South Africa, which made use of the South African Postal Service, which where we were positioned quite well with, was the wanted all business to bring products from overseas. The second part, I think there was a national strike at some point, I can't remember when, with the post office. And through that prolonged strike period where post wasn't delivered, what inadvertently happened that the post office didn't, or that the people within the post office didn't realize, is that it drove digital adoption much quicker than anticipated. So back in the day, you used to have to post your bank statement. This must be in the 2010s, 2012 somewhere. You had to get a bank statement delivered by post. If you bought shares on the JSE, you had to get a broker's note delivered by post. There were all these services that were delivered to you physically. And in that post office strike, there was legislation that deemed that you had to deliver some things over post. In the same way that I think the old days, the JSE, you had to you had to disclose your financial statements in the newspaper. And with the post office going on strike for a prolonged period, those businesses that were delivering via post decided not to do that anymore and to digitize the entire business. So when the post office came back, what ended up happening is the volumes weren't there anymore because everyone had shifted to digital delivery mechanisms. Post had stopped almost. So post struck, they start again to say, we're ready. And everyone has then left the post office and moved on to another service provider, whether it's couriers or digital, etc. Which feels like what's happening from an Eskom perspective at the same time. In other words, you go, well, we can't service you with electricity, so everyone's going to make a plan. And through that plan, when they are able to service you, you're going to be like, don't worry, I've been sorted out already. So I think that's the sort of process that we see. Whether the post office is going to come back, I'm not sure. I don't know. If they had maybe some sort of courier service or something, some unique offering that they could do, maybe. But in its current form, the functionality that they provided from a delivery perspective has now been matched or surpassed by normal sort of like business. So business takes over what government can't provide, which we're seeing in the post office, and that's, I think, is going to happen in the Eskom space as well.
Well, maybe hopefully we'll see them leverage on local businesses, technology, advice to get the infrastructure back up and running. I only hope that we do see our local or national post office get on the map again. It will be something great to see.
I think if we had a post office, what would be interesting is that how that would facilitate this cross-border transactions from abroad into South Africa. Like, people don't order from Wish because they probably don't get their goods, for instance. So I think that if the post office offered that service, then that would allow for it. What we're seeing though is Wish and Shein and these other businesses are going to make their own plans in the country. They're going to set up their own distribution centers in a country, and they're going to consolidate in China every week, ship it to this center here, and then from there distribute locally, which is what we see with Shein.
To get back to your entrepreneurial journey, you've like you said, you've invested in Superbalist, made a lot of other investments. You've been very close to the startup space and ecosystem in South Africa. You've just sold your business Parcel Ninja to Imperial. What's next for you? Are you going to be sticking to the e-commerce space? Are you looking at other avenues and other types of startups? What's on the horizon for Justin Drennen?
I'm not 100% sure yet. I think that I have a deep passion for like solving problems. I have a understanding now of supply chain logistics, which may or may not work against me, which I think is interesting. I'd still like to help do things within the Parcel Ninja organization, in that there's a lot of difficult, interesting problems to solve. And if you're going to have clever people solve difficult problems, is what I always think. And within our logistics space, we're doing a lot of work with delivery to the informal market. And I think that is a completely underserved market within South Africa. And I'm not talking just e-commerce, I'm talking just general distribution from suppliers to the sort of the informal market and spaza shops. And we've started doing some work in that space, which I think is extremely interesting, difficult, lots of challenges. But we think we've got that right, which is great. And I'd like to still be involved in in helping shape and develop those sort of strategies and solutions together with what we do at Parcel Ninja, but at the same time have the fluidity and the space to think of and see other things that are happening. I think there are a lot of opportunities. It's deciding which are ones that I want to involve myself with that actually have some sort of impact component to what we're doing as well.
And we've worked together a lot in that informal space, and probably I think that's a good sort of talking point to close on. I think the informal market, it's growing. I don't think many people in South Africa really understand the challenges, what it takes to get or to set up logistics channels and supply chains into the informal markets. How quickly and how big is that opportunity for big retailers to get right? What's your view on that?
Well, if you look at what's happening in the informal market, it's obviously one of the opportunities with a completely underserved sort of underserved method that's happening at the moment to deliver or get goods there. And in that underservice / inefficiency is margin opportunity or cost reduction to the end consumer, which I think is critical. If you look at, I'm not necessarily an expert in the township or the informal market myself. However, that naivety in not knowing about it is what's almost needed to solve the problem. It's the more you know about some of these problems, the worse, or the reasons you have to not solve it. Yeah. So I think that in that naivety / passion / problem solving approach is the way to sort out some of these things. So I think that a lot of the times the organizations know what it's like and what it's about in the township, and so they don't go and they don't want to go there. While I've been through that space a little bit more now and have a deeper understanding, that naivety allows us to continue pressing to try to solve those problems, which we've largely been able to achieve, which is great. So we've actually now, deliver to spaza shops, collect money, and manage that whole process together with the guys and help reduce costs. And when we started, everyone said there's no way you can get this right. So we did that in conjunction with yourselves and the guys at Unilever, which was great. So we started getting that going. And I think we won like Supply Chain Award, Africa's Supply Chain Award for getting that right. And that's great recognition, but we're doing it at a small scale. Now it's about how we do take that bigger and deliver way more into the township space cost effectively. And as we see digitalization of money and ordering systems and all of those things, that adoption takes place, reduces the cost to serve, and we take that cost saving to the end consumer, which is something we want to do in South Africa. And I think that's the part that's important for me from an impact perspective, is how do we make things more affordable in the informal market, because that's where things are the most expensive, bizarrely enough.
Yeah. Well, we certainly excited to embark on those challenges with you. But Justin, thanks for coming in today. It's been great talking to you, and look forward to chatting more, and hopefully we can have you on the podcast sometime in the future to talk more about developments and how maybe once Amazon's here, maybe the post office is back on the map, and look forward to having you again sometime.
Lovely. Hopefully it's before the post office gets back.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Antonio. Cheers. Thanks.
Sure.